Welcome to TLCI Radio with co-hosts Manfred Smith and Nancy DeLuca Stempel. Sponsored by the Learning Community International, the school without walls. TLCI Radio brings the future of education into view for you to see today. Join us for a lively discussion of all the options to enhance learning for students of all ages. Expand your perspective, understand what learning is all about, and position your students for a complete learning experience. And now, please join Manfred Smith and Nancy DeLuca Stempel for TLCI Radio.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to TLCI Radio. I'm Nancy DeLuca Stempel, Executive Director of the Learning Community International School, and I'll be your host today. And my co-host with me is Manfred Smith, as always. He is the founder and Principal Director of the Learning Community International School. Manfred, say hello to our little friends.
Is this a comedy show now? Hello, our little friends.
So welcome back, everyone, to TLCI Radio. Jointly, Manfred and I like to have a lot of fun in education, and jointly together we're pushing like 70 years in education. And the learning community philosophy is living and learning. The whole world is your classroom. And so we actually have a lot of fun living and learning. And we like to make jokes. But on a serious note, today we wanted to talk about ADHD, and actually we can have some fun with that too, I think. But there's I think the American Psychiatric Association is reporting somewhere around 6% of kids are being treated or are being diagnosed with ADHD, and that kind of translates into millions of kids, like 6 million children. And then there's a whole adult side of that also. So here with us today to talk about that and some strategies on how to address how some of these things are affecting your life is Abigail Wurf. And she's a performance and productivity coach for people who have ADHD. And she has a lot of strategies on how you could be successful in your personal life and your professional life. So welcome, Abigail.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Oh, good. So are we. So the first question I want to know is, what is ADHD?
Well, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, and many people might be familiar with the term ADD, which is just ADHD without the hyperactivity. Nowadays, it's called ADHD regardless whether you have hyperactivity or not, and it is a constellation of symptoms that include distractibility, hyperactivity if you have that, inattentiveness. Sometimes you have sort of fidgety, sort of itchiness inside of you, a lot of difficulty focusing, getting tasks started and completing tasks. Sometimes you're very bad at directions because of it. So it's just a constellation of symptoms that put all together come under the title of ADHD. Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it has to do not just focus, like a brain. It actually has a physical component to it as well as just a mental focus.
Yes, it does. I mean, the old list of questions that they used to ask to see if you had ADHD when they thought it was only children who had it used to be, do you have difficulty climbing on furniture? Which I always thought was sort of funny when I read this as an adult and thought, no, I haven't had difficulty climbing on furniture recently. Yeah. But because it was so focused towards kids, but that was a real thing. Kids having to sit still in the classroom can be very difficult if you have ADHD. Hopefully, as an adult, I've gotten better and I don't climb on too much furniture. But
well, that sounds like fun.
Maybe you have HAD.
Right. And I think it's interesting that early on it was more boys had it. They thought that was something that was more among boys. So that's changed?
Yeah, because one of the things is between the boys and the girls are more likely to have the hyperactive, the big H in it. Mm-hmm. Whereas many girls who have ADHD are what we'd call more inattentive. Sometimes the word associated with spacey. So they may be girls that people think are quiet or shy. But in reality, they're just really having a difficult time, laser focusing in on what's going on, for example, in the classroom. Then there are people like myself who have what we call combination. And that means we have both the ADHD with the H, but also the ADD. So sometimes we're spacey and sometimes we're hyperactive.
So that's an interesting thing about the girls and the spacey because What about girls who are athletes or very physically active? Do you see that leaning more toward the boys kind of
Well,
diagnosis?
that's interesting you should ask me that, because my growing up and my first career was as a professional dancer. And we didn't know I had ADHD back then, but I now realize that I went after school to dance for 2 to 3 hours every day, and then most of the day on Saturday. And some of the issues I had as an adult when I had to retire from dancing were just magnified in a way that when I was dancing, what I call getting my yayas out, just sort of getting that hyperness out, really helped me focus in. And they know now things like, for example, if you exercise and get your heart rate up, the right chemicals start shooting out in your brain that will allow you to focus and concentrate more. So, for example, for my college and high school students that I work with, sometimes they work out before they sit down to study because it'll help them quiet down and focus in.
Well, actually, that idea is actually true for anyone.
Oh, yes.
Because, I swim and I do other things. And I know that I get, as I swim, I'm actually thinking about things. That's where we come up with some of our great ideas.
Yeah.
I write, so I come up with plots and all kinds of things like this. As I'm swimming, I come up with really good ideas. Same idea, because you're pumping a lot more oxygen into your brain.
Right.
So I would imagine for children or anyone, having that physical activity probably helps productivity across the board for anyone.
Oh, yeah, I would think so. And I just find that sort of some of that internal itchiness that many people with ADHD have, it's never quiet. And so just doing some kind of real physical outlet that allows you a little bit of peace for an hour or two afterwards can just be really renewing and give you, sort of that leadway into sort of focusing in on something that you've been struggling with accomplishing.
So it sounds to me like, it just occurred to me, because I taught in schools for 33 years, sounds to me like instead of going the trend currently, which is, we have to cut out, the recesses and things like this. And I remember when I was teaching, it got to the point where, like, instead of kids going to gym, running around and doing their things in gym every day, it got to be more time was used during gym classes, sit in a classroom to learn about sex education and drug education, and on and on. And these kids pretty
less
soon
physical activity.
there was less and less and less physical activity. So actually what I hear you saying is that the correct prescription is for schools to have not just one recess, to have several recesses, let those kids burn this stuff off, because you get a much better result from kids focusing.
Yeah, not only does it burn out sort of the yayas, as I call it, but it can also help just really re-energize you. I think it was in April, I was speaking at a conference, and I would say 80% of the people in the room had ADHD, and it was the afternoon, and people were just like literally putting their heads down on the table, and I thought, I hope this isn't me. And so I just said, everyone stand up, and we're going to do some jumping jacks, and everyone kind of rolled their eyes, but let me tell you, 5 minutes of jumping jacks, we were all immediately re-engaged and focused into what we were trying to do, and just the mood on top of everything else, it's just a mood, riser. It just, pumped everyone up.
So now we're talking about going into kind of what our culture is today. It's a more sedentary culture. People are, and the kids in general, with all the electronics and things. So it seems like schools should start out with PE, have a PE in the middle, and a PE at home at the end, because they're going home to do their homework.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Actually, that's right.
Yeah. I remember with my youngest daughter, she was growing up, has two black belts. She was on a travel team, a softball catcher, and she played.
She's a learning community.
She's a TLCI graduate. She's a graduate in the learning community, and she's a PE teacher right now in Montgomery County.
Perfect.
But I remember when she was little, we always went to the park in the morning. And not only her, but also my other child, my son, they used to climb all over the playground equipment, but they never climbed on it the way that it was intended to. They always had some other way they were climbing all over it, and no one was really there. So I just let them do whatever they wanted. And even when we would sit down she would sit down to do some kind of schoolwork, I could see that she really wasn't focused. So I'd say, okay, get on your mark, get set, go, boom, and she'd go around the house. She'd run around the house until she'd come back in and say, okay, I'm ready. So we kind of intuitively did that, but I was thinking her as being highly kinesthetic. I wasn't thinking her of having ADHD.
Yeah, I mean, physical activity is really important, and also the other side of it's important, and that's sleep. A lot of people with ADHD do not get enough sleep because they have a real hard time quieting their brain at the end of the day. And it has just been shown that, you can take medication if you want, and it does help about 70% of the people who try medication. You can, increase your exercise, which is excellent. You can get a support, whether it's a therapist or a coach or a psychiatrist. But if you're not getting enough sleep, a lot of this other stuff isn't going to help you, because we tend to get fatigued easily when we don't have enough sleep. And one of the things that's common with those affected by ADHD is that we can easily have sort of outbursts and blurting and temper moments. And I've just found for my clients that really make a commitment to more sleep, that there's really a great reduction in that. So you need the exercise, but you also need the other side of it, of the sleep.
My husband says that to me periodically when I have those outbursts. He's like, have you had enough sleep?
Well, I can attest to that, because I get up in the morning and I look at IMs or whatever, and I'm going, 2 a.m.? Well, what is she doing up? And it's like, come on, Nancy, get thee to bed.
Go to bed. So we're going to get into some of the common kind of things that affect people with ADHD and some strategies. But before that, I wanted to ask you, are there some of these so-called constraints that can actually be dovetailed, and we can see them as actually beneficial in some gifts that people have?
Well, one of the things about being affected by ADHD is that we may have a little bit trouble with sort of shifting from one thing to another, but when we shift into that new thing, we most likely are completely into that new thing. So we tend to be very much great idea producers. Some people say we're more creative. I've met people who are equally creative who don't have the hyperactivity issues, so I don't know about that. But we tend to be able to sort of change up the game. And my theory is that if you have ADHD or you have the symptoms related to ADHD, you struggle a little bit more. And so you've fallen down multiple times in your life. And so you develop a sort of grit to get back up. So I always think of my clients as being people who are particularly scrappy. I've really never really had a client who just absolutely feels defeated. They may be frustrated. But once we get a little bit into the conversation, they always can find some new route of energy and recommitment. So I've always thought that, that scrappiness can really serve you for the rest of your life.
Sure. And like you said, like idea people and creative. I had someone, a college counselor, tell me that they saw a lot of kind of entrepreneurs.
Yes. You're 1/3 of people with ADHD will try to become an entrepreneur but before the time that they're 30.
Wow.
And the national average is that's only 14% of the population. So a little over 30% of people with ADHD become entrepreneurs at some point, and usually pretty early on. And I will admit, part of that is we don't like being told what to do a lot.
Right.
We become kind of resistant when we're told what to do. So becoming our own bosses can be really helpful in that area, and also because we're willing to take risks. People with ADHD tend to be much greater risk takers, which can be good, and it has some negative consequences, obviously. But if you are a risk taker, but you're also someone who can be scrappy and pull yourself back up
with great ideas,
you always find a new way around how to get to where you're going.
That reminds me of our earlier conversation about environment. Because what I hear you saying is that you get somebody that has ADHD, and by, in effect, becoming an entrepreneur, pulling out of the corporate system or out of the employment or the limitations, you're now in more control, also in terms of control of your schedule, meaning you can run around, jump up and down, all the things you need to do, because that also fits with in terms of the success we have in the learning community.
I'm sure.
Because we have kids coming out from schools, people come to us, and we create a very customized, individualized environment. We've seen like miracle cures, kids who are totally bombing out in a school, come to our program.
Intelligent, capable.
And they're failing, or they're in trouble, they're acting out, they come into the learning community, and sometimes within a weeks, end of the first month, you wouldn't know they were the same person anymore.
I absolutely believe that because I've seen it even with myself. My first few jobs after college, I'll be honest, I was actually laid off from one job. And part of it was such a restrictive job that it was just really hard for me to just focus in and get my work done. And once I started working for myself, well, first I went into business with another woman, and she total opposite of someone with ADHD. So we were a very complementary couple getting this business going. But it allowed me the freedom, and it was actually a dance and drama studio. So I did company dance rehearsal in the morning, then I sat down at the desk for 3 hours for paperwork, and then I went back to teaching in the late afternoon and evening. So it was perfect.
Set your schedule.
Yeah, it really worked for me because I got moving in the morning, sat down, did the paperwork, which granted to me is a little boring, and then got back up and started interacting with my students, which I always found really exciting. So it really worked well for me.
Manfred, just flipping back to what you said about the students that come to the learning community, I do all the admissions, and I interviewed a couple young men recently, and they were seniors coming. And when I told them about the possibilities of setting their own schedule, and one of them is, if you want to get up the first thing in the morning, if you want to go for a run, if you want to work out, if you want to sleep in, those are ways you can set your schedule. They were in shock that they had that kind of freedom. And I said, how does that sound to you? And they said, unbelievable. So I think the strategies that you're able to, present to students and people that are already out of school can really change their life, which brings us to your book called Forget Perfect, which I like that. How to succeed in your professional and personal life, even if you have ADHD. So I'd like to address...
Or even if you don't.
Even if you don't,
right?
If those ADHD-like symptoms are affecting your life, then you have some...
I wrote it for both populations.
Yeah.
That's why I say even if.
Yeah, even if you have or you don't have. So two of the things we were gonna look at today. One was I think it was initiating tasks and completing them.
Yeah.
So you want to address that?
A lot of people affected by ADHD really struggle with getting started on things. One of the reasons and why I titled the book Forget Perfect is we have sort of this fantasy of how we're going to do it perfectly. And once we start working, it's no longer perfect, so we get very discouraged. We can also just have trouble getting started, so I have a couple different tips. The first sort of set of tips are called what I call baby steps, and that's you do the 3 smallest, most micro baby steps towards the project and then take a break. And usually with my clients, what I have them do is call me. So they've done 3 little steps towards it. Because even if you're resistant, you can usually do 3 little steps. Take a break. Then start again and do 3 more micro steps. Give me a call. They give me a call. Well, they keep doing this. And what happens at a certain point, you just can't stand just to do 3 micro steps, so you just keep on going. So I've never gotten a 4th phone call, anyone I've done this with. And the thing is, when I say micro, I mean, let's say you're going to make a to-do list. The first step is get the piece of paper out. That's a step.
Right.
Get something to write with. That's a step. Write to do on the top of the paper. That's a step. Take a break. You kind of feel like you could do more, but you don't.
Right.
And then you sit down again, and you write the first 3 things on that to-do list. Sort papers, pick up the dog from the vet, whatever those things are. And you stop yourself at 3. Now, most people continue on. You know what I mean? So it's just a way of getting past that initial resistance. Another thing I suggest is called skipping the crawl. Well, I named it that because when I was a baby, I never crawled. I just sat. And I sat for a year, and then I sat for a second year. So when when I was about 2 years old, I finally, instead of crawling, stood up and started running around the room. And my parents were kind of shocked because they hadn't been prepared for this, but I never crawled. And it made me think that sometimes you don't need to start at the beginning. You need to start at the entry point that's right for you. And that does mean, granted, that sometimes you have to go back to the beginning. But once you're engaged, it's a little bit easier if you have to do that. And sometimes you don't need to do that. For example, this book I wrote a couple years ago, if I had tried to start, thank you, Nancy, for holding up the book. If I had to start exactly at the beginning of the book, let me tell you, it would never have gotten
written.
started.
Got it.
Because for me, what was much more important were the actionable tips inside the book. So I started writing those things, found an entry point, and then was able to backtrack and finish the beginning of the book and put it all together.
Beautiful. Let me stop you right there for a second, because I think you wanted to say something.
This reminds me of a really fantastic story. We had a young person, he was 16, come to the learning community. And the whole issue, he was very embarrassed. He talked about, he really didn't read well. He couldn't read well. So he was really concerned about how he was going to proceed. So our advice was exactly what you just said. We cannot begin where we want to be. We have to begin where we are. So with this young man, what happened was we basically encouraged him and supported him to begin reading at the level he actually was comfortable and could understand. So we got him to go into the junior sections in the library, and he picked up books that were like for 10-year-olds, fourth grade,
fourth and sixth grade, yeah.
fourth or fifth grade, which is a level he could read. And that's where it began. He would begin to read all these different stories. He really liked reading. He began to read more and more and more. By the time he graduated, about 2 years or so later, he was reading pretty much, he gained, I would say, certainly into the high school level reading and comprehension. So, you can't begin. This is a perfect example of what you just said. You cannot begin where you want to be. You have to begin where you can, where you're capable, where you're able.
Yeah, and also because it's really about the well-being of our students.
Yeah.
So we tell students too, how old are you? You're 16. Then let's just start at that. Let's start at 10th grade or 11th grade, whatever it is. But we're going to work where you're at. So that kind of affects their. Otherwise, they think, what am I in 5th grade? So we let them. So we adjust it like that too. So what else you got there for us, Abigail?
Well, another thing is to make a plan, and I don't mean you have to make a big, complicated plan, because you can spend your whole time planning and not doing. But making a list of each action you need to take, because one of the things that happens sometimes is we take one action, and then we're not sure what the next action is, and then that's what distracts us. So if you just have a list of action, 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 you can then just, when you start to feel yourself fading away, you just say, what's the next action? And sometimes, now, I don't know if this is really a kosher suggestion, but it's one that some of my clients use, and I'll admit I use it too sometimes. Sometimes you just have to get yourself really worked up and mad. And you get mad at whoever maybe gave you the assignment, or you get mad at the person who brought you into this world, or you get mad at whoever you want, and just work yourself up into, I will not be defeated. I will do this. I will conquer this. I will not let them take me down.
We will fight them on the beaches.
We will fight them on the beaches. Exactly. And what happens is your adrenaline starts pumping.
Got it.
And it starts to give you energy towards doing it. And along with that, you can also make it public. I mean, one time I had a proposal I had to do, and I just wasn't starting it. So I went on to social media and saying, I have a proposal due at 2 p.m. And that's 2 hours away, and I'm going to commit to doing it right now. And I got people coming back to me saying, you go, girl. But it was great, because by making a public announcement,
affirmation or statement,
you put yourself out there.
I put myself out there. I didn't want to then disappoint. So that's another way you can get
Interesting.
yourself started.
Awesome. So, do you want to go now? Did you want to move on to the managing time, or do you have other things to say about?
Talk about managing time. I think we're probably down to about 5 minutes of managing. So this is good time.
So let's continue with initiating tasks. That's the initiating side. Is that also the completing them?
Well, the completing is being very clear about what each next action is. And also, one of the things that people with ADHD can do is they can go into what's called hyperfocus. And what hyperfocus is, it's almost as though you get tunnel vision, and you just are focused in on what you're doing to the exclusion of all else. I mean, a fire alarm could go off and you wouldn't notice. Now, a lot of people with ADHD, when they get into that state, they think it's really great because, wow, I'm getting a lot done. But if it's an ongoing project you're working on, it can be detrimental. Because what happens is, let's say you have to do like an hour on that project each day, but one day you work like 5 hours on it. You just get sick of it, and you get resistant to it. So then you decide, well, I don't need to work tomorrow on it because I worked 5 hours today.
Got it.
And then the next day you're like, I don't need to work on it because I got a little bit ahead. And then you've lost all your momentum. So I really try to encourage my clients to really, if you have a long-term project, to be very clear about what each next action is, but also not to burn yourself out in one day, because it's going to stop your momentum, and you're not going to get started again until the day before it's due. And that might not be enough time.
That advice, from a teaching point of view, that advice is for every student, because you have the student syndrome.
Right.
You wait. You have various variations.
Yes.
You wait. You know, like, oh, I got 2 weeks. Oh, I got a week. Oh, I got 4 days. I got 3 days. Oh my God, I got to get it done tomorrow. Well, it's sort of the inverse of that.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. And for some of my students, what we do is we make out a time chart. And the time chart can be easy as just, I don't know if anyone can see this.
Yeah.
But what it is it's just a color chart where we put all your fixed activities on the chart for each day of the week. And then we start looking at when would be the best study times so that those become appointments too, rather than just basing it on how much you have due a week from then. What you're doing is you're constantly working forward and developing the habits of I study. For example, on this chart, the person who we made this for doesn't want to work Friday afternoons or Saturdays at all. That's fine. So he has 2 study sessions on Monday, 1 on Tuesday, because he has a lot of classes on Tuesday, 2 study sessions on Wednesday, and on Thursday, just 1 study session on Friday, and then 2 study sessions on Sunday.
And it's plugged in.
It's plugged in, and then what we do for each week is we figure out what is coming up in advance. So what should we be doing in one of these sections, so that occasionally you'll have to work outside of these, but what really happens is it develops a habit and a commitment that I have the expectation that during those slots I'm going to be working. So it's not about, should I get to work? Should I not get to work? Does it really need to be done now? But instead it's like, what can I do during this time, which I've already set aside to start studying?
And this is a chart that you can put up on your wall. It's not like on your phone, but it's something you see on the wall.
Yes, I have a lot of my clients, my students, use paper calendars actually now, because it really helps them to visually see what is going on and to see past just one day. And to have not just your classes or what I think of as your fixed activities, but your non-fixed activities, which would be like the studying or the errands, that you have to allocate time for that and be smart about it so that you're not doing one errand each day, because that's disruptive.
It's kind of like a budget.
Yeah.
You're budgeting your time.
Yeah, you're budgeting.
Yeah.
You're budgeting. So yeah.
Well, I have a little bit of a problem with the words managing time, because I don't think we can really manage time, because time is immutable.
Yeah, it is.
We
what it
can't
is.
stretch it.
No.
But we can manage our actions. And if we manage our actions, and we manage those actions based on sort of our big whys in the world, our goals, the roles we have among different people in our lives, like student, spouse, worker. If you are clear about your goals for each of those things, what your sort of big whys are and what your values are, it makes it so much easier to make decisions on what actions you're going to take, because you're going to go, is this in alignment with what I want to accomplish?
Right.
Or is this not in alignment with what I want to accomplish, either in the short term or the long term?
I am so happy to announce that Abigail Wurf is going to start working with the learning community and making her services and coaching strategies available to our students. And so I wanted to let people also know that you can get her book, Forget Perfect. I think it's going to pop up underneath your
you just
website.
need to go to my website, and you can get there. You can go to Amazon.
And it's
Either way.
www.abigailwurf.com.
You got it.
Right. And we're definitely going to have you back on, because I think we're running out of time. But no, the time is what it is. I think we did.
What, you mean we don't control reality?
But we had such a wonderful conversation, and I want to have you back so we can talk a little bit more about managing more of our behavior within the time scope of things. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Please, come back on Thursday at 11 o'clock. We show at 11. And
if you're interested in enrolling in the learning community, we have rolling enrollment. You can come in anytime. You can have a conversation with Nancy, a 30-minute
Discovery
conference.
Visit us at our website. I'm sure it's popping up there, tlcischool.org, or you can call me directly at 301-788-3571. Thank you so much, Abigail. Thank you, Manfred, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.